I'm just gonna ask the remonstrators all be seated, please, until the remonstrators are speaking. Thank you.
Today we're joined by Jeff Hughes, CEO, and Senior Vice President David Armistead from DC Blox. Their bios are in tab 1 of the exhibit book, where you can find more information about DC Blox. We briefly touch on the company DC Blox. They were founded in 2014 and have over 10 locations in the Southeast. DC Blox would like to bring an edge node facility for a tenant to Indianapolis. DC Blox is a trusted community partner. In tab 13, you'll find over 7 letters of support from current communities that know DC Blox for keeping their commitments and running safe operations, with countless examples of how DC Blox has been beneficial to other communities. This site is 32 acres with 22 acres that can be developed on the northwest corner of the Thunderbird Commerce Center in the old Ford Visteon site on the east side. Kitley, which is an industrial corridor, is to the west. Kitley is also home to the speedrome racetrack less than a half a mile away from this site. English is to the south with a picture of Monarch in the middle with 37 truck bays on Fintail. The Kroger Bakery is at the bottom photo with the truck trailers. An over 220-foot ADS easement with a substation is to the north, separating the Pensy Trail from the site. Shadeland is to the east, with highway-like interchanges at both English and Washington Street. And then the Thunderbird separates Shadeland with the ABF truck terminal, which has 96 truck terminals and 560 parking spots for vans and trailers. As one might imagine, as a former automotive plant here, this is an industrial site. It's been zoned I-3 since 1956 with an active railroad that we could hear on our site visit just this week. Our request before you today is a variance of use because a data center, or more specifically an edge node facility, is an undefined use. The variance for development standards stems from our desire to reduce the parking and environmental impact with less paving than the ordinance requires. The replat allows the parcels to correspond to their phases and potential future. The site plan will show this is a multi-phase project. Phase 1 in Building 1 has plans to be operational within 24 months. AES has the capability to serve Building 1 with 10 megawatts of tenant need, with minor updates to the existing substation. The site plan shows there are significant industrial operations surrounding the property. DC Blox has built Building 1 just outside of Atlanta. We've toured with Councilor Hart, the Indianapolis Chamber, and the building trades, so we know this design of this building operates as a quiet warehouse. Here you can see a close-up of the site plan at full build-out. Phase 1 is an edge node facility for a tenant with critical infrastructure needs in central Indiana. It's a 70,000 square foot single-story building with 6 generators located in the interior of the site with a berm to the north, screening of the utility yard as well. Phase 2 is unknown at this time, but is mapped out on the site plan with caps for building size, power, and heights. Ford ceased their operations first in 2007. DC Blox has redeveloped a brownfield with countless similarities with this site in Birmingham. A neighbor recently testified in Birmingham, unbeknownst to DC Blox, and he said, "I live near DC Blox. It's walking distance from my house. I'm happy to report there have been no major concerns from them. They've been very transparent. They've been very accountable, and they let us know what's going on." Today, we're joined by Chris Braun with Blues, who's an environmental lawyer in Indy and has a full accounting of this brownfield. He's available to answer any questions that you may have. Months ago, we posted on our website about a letter about the brownfield, and we've provided additional information just this morning after additional meetings with the state about the brownfield in response to some incorrect information from some of the remonstrators. DC Blox would be the third entity to remediate this specific site, and I would note that Monarch is currently operating on this Thunderbird brownfield The reality is that parks, housing, and farms are not practical options for this specific I-3 parcel as a brownfield. DC Blox has also developed with schools sharing a specific fence line. You can see the arrow here shows a Huntsville school 234 feet from DC Blox, whereas the school in Indy would be more than 582 feet away. It's more than double the distance. The school neighbor in Huntsville has provided a letter of support outlining that they have not had any issues with DC Blox as a neighbor to their school. The letter is in tab 13. In tab 12, you'll see a NOAA wind rose that shows the wind moving away from the school in this specific area. DC Blox can provide a more positive experience for the school as a neighbor than the other potential I-3 uses allowed by right. Some of these benefits are highlighted in the trip memo, which is in tab 7, which shows a 75% reduction in traffic, which means less truck diesel exhaust, less beeping, less manufacturing waste and emissions. Here's a full build-out rendering. And here quickly we'll go over the I-3 uses allowed by right today. This slide shows a number of the reasons why approval of this variance would be a benefit for the community over the I-3 uses allowed by right in the last slide, including that data center projects like this one have little traffic but high wages and high assessed value. The current property pays only $27,000 annually in taxes. DC Blox would provide significantly more tax revenue than the other I-3 uses. DC Blox is a low user of city services. We've met with IFD as noted in tab 14. In addition, a retired IFD firefighter did a visit and a review of the DC Blox operations in Irvington recently. We are thrilled to have a letter of support from the unions, which is in tab 10. John Hooker is available today for any questions that you may have about long-term construction jobs as proposed. Please incorporate our robust findings of fact in tab 5 and include the exhibit book its entirety for the record. We are in full agreement with the staff report. Kathleen will walk through a few updates that need to be made, and we draw your attention to the fact that this parcel is in an industrial reserve overlay, which states it's prime for industrial development. We agree with staff's analysis, which demonstrate that all of the findings have been met. This is a unique slide. Here's a picture of the fiber map, which allows an edge node facility to be adequately located. The site is located below a utility easement with an existing AES substation. The data center use generates fewer trips, less daily activity, and less visual impact than the other I-3 uses as demonstrated from the engineer's trip memo.
Again, no talking while someone else is speaking. You will be asked to leave if you continue to talk.
We'll get caught up if you wanna go through the slides and then we'll get caught up. And then I'll say the next slide with you.
Why is the timer going?
We're on this slide, this is the slide we're on.
Why is the timer stopped?
Yeah, why is the timer stopped? I don't know for us.
There are technical difficulties right now which we're trying to address.
I can just say next slide. commitments, DC Blox has agreed to pay for the infrastructure, generation, transmission, and distribution, so those costs are not passed on to local customers. Bottom line is DC Blox pays 100% for energy. DC Blox has also committed to using green power through an AES offset program, which was forwarded to Councilor Nielsen and his constituents in the neighboring district. You will see more information on energy in tab 3, which shows other Indiana utilities, including AES, have had rate decreases and or projected savings due to data centers. Unless the demand for this specific edge node facility is eliminated, the impact to the connected MISO grid is the same, next slide, whether the edge node facility is then sited in AES's service territory or another utility because of the internet connected grid. If this project fails, the impact to the grid is the same. It just means AES customers would not get the benefit of the commitment of DC Blox to pay 100% of their utility costs, which has some benefit to existing customers. And therefore, AES customers would then be on the hook for upgrading old infrastructure. And Indianapolis residents would receive the benefit of the taxes from a high-value project like this. But the grid impact remains the same whether this project is sited here or elsewhere, because the demand for the building one as an edge node facility exists to serve central Indiana. Next slide. The project will use both waterless cooling and a closed-loop water system. The project at full build-out is proposed to use the water equivalent of only 11 homes annually. A huge community benefit as a low water user. More information can be found in tab 12. Staff found our commitments are clear, measurable, and enforceable, directly related to mitigation. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Here's a view from the Pensy Trail showing the berm and the landscaping. Next slide. On top of the berm is a double staggered row of evergreen trees, which is consistent with the proposed EMD data center guardrails. Next slide. We've worked very closely with the neighbors, district counselor, other counselors, staff on additional commitments. We've inspected the generators in Atlanta and even started a generator. You can see more information in tab 4. The generators will be housed with insulation and only run during outages or testing. Testing will not occur after 5 p.m. or before 7 a.m. or on weekends or holidays. No annual tests during school session per neighbor request. DC Blox has also committed to using diesel particulate filters, which capture roughly 95% of the particulate emissions. Next slide. Consistent with the proposed guardrails, there is a commitment for a sound study. The sound of the property line must not exceed 65 decibels. The utility yards are positioned in the center of the parcel with screening. We've updated the commitments and plan of operations to cap the number of generators in the event less generators can serve the facility. Next slide. We've addressed lighting mitigation. The closest residential home is over 646 feet away. Next slide. This slide shows that commitments are consistent with the proposed guardrails, including an update to the decommissioning plan per a conversation with Councilor Nielsen and a neighbor just on Friday. Next slide. We've worked with the Parks Alliance to create some guardrails for the trail donations for the Pensy, and we worked with AES and DMG on some cleanup and beautification of the easement with native plants. Next slide. Today we're joined by supporters, neighbors, the trades, experts, and members of the project team, including Loft, AES Indiana, Indiana Chamber, the Technology and Innovation Association, and Integra. We have petition supporters and additional letters of support from the area in tabs 11 and 13. DC Blox hopes to earn the trust of every neighbor and have positive experiences with the Indianapolis community as they've shown elsewhere. You can see our extensive work with the community and elected officials outlined in tab 2. This includes neighborhood meetings, forums with multiple counselors, individual coffees, meetings with interested groups, door-to-door to over 600 residents, 7,200 mailers, a website updated frequently, podcasts and Zooms, etc. We are pleased to have the support of the Warren Township Development Association, who has a very thoughtful letter on file. Next slide. To close, DC Blox is committed to pay for energy, use a closed loop or waterless system, provide a significant buffer with berm, landscaping, and transitional yard. EPA and IDEM will oversee the brownfield development. We've addressed noise. The plan of operation clearly shows the intensity of this project will not be increased compared to the permitted uses. There will not be a substantial deviation from the neighborhood character beyond the current permitted uses, reinforced by the report from the appraisers. The property is uniquely suited for a high-capacity electrical infrastructure due to its proximity to the existing utility infrastructures in the fiber network. Strict application is in full compliance with the comp plan.
Thank you. Remonstrators, you have 15 minutes unless just the. Yes, sir.
I'll wait till the period.
Okay,
I'm here
all right.
to enter. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And again, just as a reminder, please state your name and address when you start speaking.
Data Center. I've resided in Irvington since 1999. I currently serve as president of the Historic Irvington Community Council for the past 4 years. I've served as president of the Friends of Irving Circle Park since 1996. That consists of a group of volunteers who spend hundreds of volunteer hours taking care of our beloved pocket park. I also serve as secretary of the Irvington Historical Society and volunteer with the Irvington Garden Club. I, as well as many other Irvingtonians, spend hundreds of hours annually working to maintain a high quality of life for all who reside in the Irvington neighborhood. I'm well known in Irvington because I'm accessible to others, and I possess a long history of volunteer work and leadership within the community. I want to thank the Indianapolis Metropolitan Development Commission for this opportunity to remonstrate against the requested use variance for the proposed DC Blox data center to be built at the Thunderbird Commerce Center located at 305 Pintail Drive, just off the Pennsy Trail located near Kitley and Rawls Avenues. I'm appreciative of the time that DC Blox has spent participating in meetings with community leaders and neighbors in both Irvington and Warren Township. I want to especially thank and acknowledge the amazing efforts of our City County Councilor, Councilor Andy Nielsen, for the considerable time spent conducting the District 12 Public Forum and Neighborhood Survey. I also want to thank all the Irvington and Warren Township residents who showed out today. Several had to leave because of employment, responsibilities, and that sort of thing. During my meetings and interactions with DC Blox and their legal representative, all have stressed they want to be transparent and hope the Irvington community will trust them based upon their actions. They've provided PowerPoint presentations and answered questions during public forums, reassuring the citizenry that their data center operations will not negatively impact either our health, the environment, or the cost of our living. They've exhorted the value of this proposed high tax revenue facility, touted their investments in other communities, and dangled the promises of potential investments in our community. Their presentations and actions have, however, been performative only, in my opinion. I have on multiple occasions requested DC Blox provide environmental studies on their website page set up specifically to help educate Irvington residents. I even told them they could select the studies that they wanted to post on that page. I've also requested they provide a plan for decommissioning on several occasions and asked them to post that on the website as well. They failed to do so, leading me to believe and conclude that they are at best disingenuous in their desire to be transparent and truthful. Further, DC Blox has been insincere in their statements regarding tax abatements. During an April 7th meeting in Irvington, they stated building of the data center would occur without tax abatements. During the Warren Township meeting on May 21st, company representatives initially denied having made this statement on 4/7, but then backtracked when confronted with the meeting having been recorded on tape. Company representatives then indicated that they had made a mistake. A multi-billion-dollar company made a mistake. I requested that they post a statement on their DC Blox Indianapolis page to clarify the actual use of tax abatements and was reassured that this would be done. None of the requested information has been added as promised, which is puzzling since DC Blox has thousands of employees who could find and post that information on their page within hours of a request. These promises without action showing lack of respect for the Irvington community and complete inauthenticity in their words and actions. DC Blox stated to me on June 5th that no other community has pushed back on their plans to build data centers. I'm aware that Nashville, Tennessee now has a petition with over 380,000 signatures remonstrating against their plans to build a data center next to Nashville Zoo. The reality is that data centers utilize extraordinary amounts of water and electricity. Our electrical bills will rise. While initially jobs will increase during construction of the site, those will go away upon completion of the construction, with merely 35 employees being in the data center. The data center will be less than a mile from an elementary school, but DC Blox has failed to provide studies as requested to validate their statement that the noise, pollution, and daily operations will in no way impact our valued and vulnerable children. My research has shown that any tax benefits from this project will not be experienced or have impact on the Irvington community for years into the future. Very little tax revenue plays out at a local level where data centers are built. In 2025, both the states of Virginia and Georgia gave up $1 billion apiece worth of revenue because tax breaks were given to data centers. $1 billion in each state that could be used for education, healthcare, housing, and infrastructure. I've communicated with literally hundreds of Irvington residents in the past month. Not even one is in favor of the DC Blox data center. Councilor Nielsen has the results of a neighborhood survey showing 83% of all respondents are against the installation of the data center. Irvington does not want or need either a data center or DC Blox in our neighborhood. Indianapolis and Indiana need to use all of our tax dollars now to improve life for Hoosiers. Indiana currently ranks as the worst state for air pollution, 19th in education, 20th in infrastructure, 21st in crime and corrections, 32nd in poverty, 33rd in fiscal stability, 34th in infant mortality, 35th in healthcare, 38th in health overall, 40th in economy, and 44th in environmental protections. Our tax dollars are better spent. I strongly recommend denial of DC Blox request for the variance to build a data center. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner and staff. My name is Dawn Briggs. I'm 5926 Oak Avenue in historic Irvington. I've been a proud Irvington resident for 43 years, which is still kind of a newcomer in Irvington time. Over the years, I have helped to found the Irvington Garden Club, the Irvington Farmers Market, the Irvington Development Organization. I've served on the Irvington Community Council for 6 terms, and I am currently the Land Use Committee Chair. I have participated in the historic Irvington Preservation Signature Drive, and then spent the next 2 years helping to write the IPC-approved guidelines for Irvington. I was chosen by the Department of Metropolitan Development and Ball State University as the community builder for the Irvington Utility Plan, and I currently represent Irvington on the TIF. I share this background for one reason only. For decades, I have had the privilege of listening to people who call Irvington home, and as of late, they've had a lot to say. Today, I am here simply as a resident who lives less than a mile away from this proposed facility. I am here as a neighbor, a volunteer, a mother, and most importantly, a grandmother, because I am opposed to this variance. You know who we Irvingtonians are. We're homeowners, community members, people who've invested our lives in our neighborhood. We care deeply about our historic homes, about Halloween, our environment, our safety, and the quality of life that makes Irvington and our neighboring sister communities special. And many of us are afraid. We're very afraid. Not because we oppose technology, and not because we oppose progress. We're concerned because we do not yet know the long-term impact this facility could have on our neighborhoods, our infrastructure, the environment, property values, and our quality of life. Once decisions like this are made, there's no turning back. I understand that some residents and organizations may see benefits in this project as they stand with their hands out, and I respect that perspective. But regardless of where we stand, there are still significant unanswered questions that deserve careful review before a variance should be granted. What makes our request today especially reasonable is that city leaders themselves have recognized there are still unanswered questions. In May, the City County Council unanimously passed the resolution urging pause on new data center approvals while Indianapolis develops stronger standards and regulations. That action acknowledged an important reality. Our city is still trying to understand the ramifications of these facilities and how to best protect its residents while accommodating growth. DC Blox may have submitted its application before those discussions were completed, but the concerns that led elected officials to call for caution hasn't disappeared. Those concerns are exactly why we are standing here today. We've heard promises, we've heard assurances that everything will be fine, but promises are not the same as proven facts, and assurances are not the same as enforceable commitments. So today, I am asking you for something that is entirely within your power to provide, and that's time. Time to gather information, time to understand the impacts, time to secure real, meaningful commitments, time to ensure that the people who will be most affected and have confidence that their concerns have truly been addressed. Your decision that you make today will affect our homes, our children, our investments, our neighborhoods, and our environment for decades to come. Please do not approve this variance today. Give our historic community the time that it deserves with the rest of the city to gather the information and all be on the same page together. Thank you for your time.
I live at 6155 Oak Avenue, 1/3 of a mile away from Fincan Drive. The petitioner targeted heavy industrial properties with strong fiber and existing utilities, stating that this property appealed to them because it was adjacent to other heavy industrial uses, a brownfield site, and required minimal utility upgrades due to the existing substation. These features were specifically sought out as a business advantage. The same features considered peculiar equally benefit the adjacent I-3 facilities, with Monarch clearly demonstrating they're irrelevant to the viability of I-3 use. Staff's hardship argument hinges on the claim that proposed use is prohibited solely due to the absence of a listed land use classification. That's not hardship under Indiana law. It's a known regulatory gap that applies equally to any parcel in Marion County right now. Indiana precedent requires the property can't be reasonably put to any conforming use. Loss of profit doesn't count. Staff has completely failed to meet that standard. The hardship argument was additionally undercut on the record, and staff ignored it. Vincent Ash confirmed the site allows for a lot of different uses, and there's a lot of other uses that can move forward. That's an informed admission from a subject matter expert with direct knowledge of this zoning, and it cannot be ignored for findings 3 and 4. DC Blox sought out land it knew was not zoned for their purposes. The hardship that staff has relied on is self-inflicted by the petitioner. Staff's peculiarity factors describe the entire campus. Size, depth, easements, substation proximity characterize doing business at Thunderbird, where successful conforming uses have been developed under the same conditions. Nothing staff cites is specific to Block A. These are general attributes shared across an industrial park that present no realized limitation on an approved by right I-3 use. Staff conflated Ford's BRP closure with current development obligations. It addresses historical remediation, not the ongoing obligations that run with the land under the replacement ERC reported on March 17th, 2025. Due to current site conditions and development practices, the covenant not to sue is itself at risk, pending an open item investigation. Staff neglected to mention this in the recommendation. We asked the petitioner for direct commitments addressing the known risks of this brownfield. No new wells, no dewatering during construction, and restoration of residential wells if compromised by their activity. Those were rejected. We requested an emergency plan as well as training and equipment for IFD. We were given a confirmation that a fire truck can make it down the lane. We asked for Tier 4 generators to address our failing airshed. They fell short, opting instead for diesel particulate filters, offering no transparency on the specs or quality of filtration. We asked them for independent third-party sound studies, for written limits around construction noise, and an agreed definition of emergency to prevent the use of generators as a primary power source, which has been demonstrated by other data centers while local utilities were ramped. They verbally promised low-frequency testing but have refused to put it to paper. We requested a website with testing results, documented violations, complaint submissions, and corrective action plans. What was committed hardly resembles the request. The only useful information that can't be obtained elsewhere is a phone number and an undefined document repository with no strings attached. Road damage from construction was raised as an uncompensated cost that will fall directly on adjacent property owners and the public. Our community made these reasonable requests in good faith. Every single one the petitioner has ignored, rejected, or denied. The property value report from IRR doesn't satisfy the evidentiary burden. It opens with the USPAP disclaimer acknowledging the limited basis for their own conclusions. 2 of the 5 sites studied weren't operational for the entirety of the study. New Carlisle only partially operational for the last 3 months of a 60-month study that looks backwards to see value. Fort Wayne was only open for the last month.
Yeah.
It's now time for the city county councilors to talk in whatever order you decide.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner, and good afternoon. My name is Andy Nielsen, address 200 East Washington Street, Tower 441-46204. I represent District 14 on the east side. I've also submitted a letter outlining my position, but I come before you today requesting that you recommend denial of the petitions in question. The proposed site sits directly on the border of 2 city council districts and Council District 20, directionally south of District 14 that I represent. With respect to district lines, as I don't make it a priority to get involved in other districts, my involvement and engagement on this petition is unique, given the proximity to the proposed site and that 97% of the nearly 1,800 residents who live within a half-mile radius of the proposed site live in District 14. Many of those residents are here today and who have had to leave. And as we know, political boundaries do not reflect neighborhood boundaries. In late April 2026, I held a community forum for neighbors to learn more from the petitioner. Recently, I closed a month-long survey to collect input from residents. The results from the survey reflect a trend I have heard via hundreds of phone calls, text messages, emails, social media messages, and conversations with neighbors directly on this proposed development. As emphasized by President Beecher, 83% of respondents opposed the proposed data center, with nearly 70% selecting strong opposed. The community's concerns were deep, consistent, and clear. The 4 themes that emerged most strongly, and to highlight and to repeat: environmental concerns related to air quality from diesel generators, energy risk strain, and the long-term environmental footprint of a facility of this scale, and the lack of a robust decommissioning plan in case the developer walks away from the site. Utility costs stemming from pressure neighbors already feel from existing rates, along with deep skepticism about promises that a data center won't drive rates higher. Noise and light pollution generated by operational noise for cooling systems and backup generators, and when those generators will be used, and the proximity of the site to a elementary school and the Penzie Trail. Finally, growing concerns that any potential community benefits are contingent on neighbors and or elected officials' support of the project, including tax incentives, and not an authentic commitment to support the neighborhood, as specific details remain to be seen. These concerns remain, and the context of the community's decision is very important, Madam Hearing Examiner, as it was not made with haste. Instead, it is an example of how an engaged community makes an informed decision about what they want their neighborhood to look like in the future, and it is not one steeped in anti-development fervor. Of note, the petitioner has been communicative on several issues. The proposed development does sit on a brownfield site, making future development challenging, and the project may be built with union labor, and the project may generate significant tax revenue. I emphasize these points to my neighbors and to the petitioner to provide an honest overview of the proposed development. It does have the potential to provide benefits to the district and the people who I represent. But again, these are potential benefits. And as I stand before you today, these are unclear or quite unknown, presenting a significant risk that in fact a benefit may not exist to before the community. Importantly, the community is also aware of these prospective benefits, which I think you've heard, but feels strongly that the potential costs are too high. Long-term success of any project is contingent on community trust and respect and assurance their voices have been heard. My district has performed a cost-benefit analysis and has ultimately concluded that the development costs more than the benefits it could generate. Finally, I believe strongly that the staff report emphasizes a powerful tool that is in your possession and key to good government and good public policy, and that's discretion. Finding one of the staff report under public health, safety, morals, and general welfare, staff states that, quote, public testimony and correspondence have raised concerns related to potential impacts of the proposed data center use, including noise, operation of diesel generators, and overall energy consumption. Staff acknowledges these concerns as part of the public record and took that into consideration during the zoning analysis, end quote. An acknowledgement and consideration of the concerns in the staff's analysis is the very basis by which you, Madam Hearing Examiner, may recommend denial of this petition. This is a clear recognition that this process has discretion. From staff's own analysis, community concern and voice has been weighed against several of the commitments that have been outlined, which remain incomplete, thereby strengthening the community's argument and concerns. Madam Hearing Examiner, you have the discretion to provide a more critical analysis that this finding has not been satisfied. For these reasons, I request that you recommend denial of the petition of the Metropolitan Development Commission and properly weigh community concerns. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Hearing Examiner. My name is Jesse Brown. I live at 2022 North Riley Avenue. That's Indianapolis, Indiana 46218. And as you're aware, I'm the City County Councilor for District 13. That is the Near East Side, but it does not include the parcel in question today. I first want to thank Councilor Nielsen for his excellent comments. I want to co-sign all of them and thank him for his leadership throughout this process. Despite my district not including this parcel, I wanted to tell you that dozens upon dozens of my constituents asked me to come here today to remonstrate against this variance request on their behalf. The people of District 13 wanted me to detail all the many reasons why they find data centers in general to require additional oversight beyond mere variance requests. Let's be honest here, we all know this is not the appropriate format for handling a data center conversation. When I say we all know that, what I mean is that
Okay, no more noise, please. Let the counselor talk.
when I say we all know that, what I mean is that the Department of Metropolitan Development has said that variances are inappropriate, and instead they have proposed Special Use District 47 for data centers moving forward. They're still working out the details on that and have not presented it to the Metropolitan Development Commission. But in the meantime, the City County Council has unanimously asked the MDC for a data center moratorium. I'm aware that that does not apply retroactively. I'm aware that people have already entered the pipeline, but as Councilor Nielsen indicated, you do have discretion here, and I find those details relevant. These facilities have substantial impact on our electric grid, and again, we find it inappropriate to approve variances at this time, given that the city, as an almost unanimous whole, has said that that's not going to be appropriate very soon. I also, though, wanted to speak about this project specifically. I've personally been in contact with DC Blox representatives for, I think, a few months now. And in that amount of time, their proposal has moved from a maximum of 28 diesel backup generators to a maximum of 56. We are deeply concerned by the quickly escalating request, especially in light of the very poor air quality that demonstrators mentioned Indianapolis already faces. Data centers are able to use battery backup rather than rely on diesel generators, or they could use Tier 4 generators. This company has chosen not to do either as a way of saving money and thereby passing negative externalities on to my constituents as well as these other councilors' constituents. I will also add that this is personal to me, as I've personally driven my nephew to the school adjacent to this parcel. We should not require children to breathe in diesel exhaust in order to increase profits for an out-of-state company. Finally, although I understand your role as a hearing examiner is to apply the rules as written, I still ask you to consider the context of the scenario before you today. The reason we have human beings serve in the role of hearing examiner rather than simply automate it or outsource it to Claude or ChatGPT is because we rely on your extensive human experience and empathy. How many times in the last year have you seen this room absolutely overflowing with regular taxpayers and voters all on the same side of this issue? How many people have spent their PTO or their days off in order to walk through a metal detector and wait in silence for over 3.5 hours just to demonstrate their desires? Look at how many people have sat silently today, none of them getting paid a dime, just to make it clear how opposed they are to this project. Every single poll, every single survey, every possible measurement of voter sentiment suggests that people in Indianapolis are demanding that the government they pay for and consent to must stand against data center developments in Marion County. Please use your role to honor the requests of our bosses, the public, and deny the request today. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Examiner. My name is Michael Ballhart, representing District 20, the district that's housing the data center. And first, I just want to thank you because I know you've gone through this a few times now. This is a very difficult thing, and it brings out a lot of people in the communities. This is my second time going through this process. I've done it on the south side of Indianapolis in my district as well. Now we're here again. And I think what's important in these situations is to understand the procedural process behind this and what you're doing and then where we're at in all of this. I think it's important to note that this is a use case variance, not a rezone. And so essentially, I don't have the same authority that I did in previous cases. And the things that you're looking for are really the evaluation of the zoning ordinance, the comp plan, land use, and you're taking things into consideration. And that's what I'm trying to identify and articulate and understand in this process and share my experiences with you today of what I've seen so far. Where I've had unique experiences, I'm the only counselor who's had multiple data center hearings up to this point. And I can wholeheartedly tell you I know what bad looks like at this point. The first time I went through this process, I was stricken under an NDA. I wasn't able to share details. I didn't sign that to make sure I could be a part of that conversation and represent the people that I could represent. That hasn't happened in this case. In previous cases, I've seen different land use styles where I've seen this type of development attempted in dwelling and agriculture and partial of industrial. I've been part of those conversations where the financial contributions just do not add up through financial analysis. And these are the same rigorous investigations that I've been doing on DC Blox. And there's 4 main buckets that I'm always identifying when I'm working with either one of these types of developments. That's financial. What's to be determined for the city as a whole and the district? It is the utility usage, because there's certainly a lot of water and certainly a lot of electricity being used in these, the environmental concerns, as well as the quality of life for residents. And, from what I've deducted from my last case to this case, we have 2 completely different types of developments. And it is very important to note that these are not all the same by any means. But I also want to be very clear that I haven't received 100% of all the information yet for this specific case. And what I mean by that is that it's not because of the petitioner withholding anything. In fact, it's because of the IEDI in this case. And so, when I mentioned those 4 buckets, utility, environmental, quality of life, and financial, we have projections on what some of the financials could look like, but there's no actual package yet coming from the IEDI on what the full incentive package could look like. And that to me is very important because I have to analyze all these things before I'm going to make a decision whether I'm in favor or I'm opposed to one of these things. But I'll tell you this, the process so far, in terms of transparency, I can tell you has been vastly different from the first time. It's actually been a positive experience where anytime I've asked for information, the phone calls were returned to me immediately, where in past cases, I would wait days or even weeks to hear back from somebody. I did take a trip down to one of their sites with the intent of trying to find information firsthand for me, right? Because I received and the people I represent, and I share that information on a regular basis. I think you've read some of the documents you have, and you've seen my newsletter time and again. I've shared all this information with the people I represent, the people that read that letter, and there's about 5,500 people that get that newsletter every week. I've received an email a lot from Irvington residents on 4 main topics. danger to school children, resource drain, and little community benefit. And so these things all fall under the buckets that I'm looking at, whether I'm looking at environmental, utilities, quality of life in the school, and community benefit. So where I've been, I've gone down there on the subject of noise. You know, albeit I had a very cheap, what I call a decibel meter. I bought one on Amazon. It's like $30. But it was consistent in noise readings I took across various places. I went down to Atlanta, and I went to a facility that was the same exact building that we're gonna see today, or that they're proposing today. And it was actually quite a benign structure. I was underwhelmed by what was actually there. It was very small. Inside the unit itself, I took decibel, audible readings, and it was 60 decibels inside. We went outside, turned on the generator, we ran them, and I took incremental readings in front at 75 feet, 100 feet, and then 475 feet. Each of those, you know, the closer you are, you know, I think it was no more than 75 when I was 75 feet away from it, and then it would get a lot less the farther I get away. To note, the petitioners did have a different decimal meter there that did look a lot more quality than mine was, and their readings were showing lower. But what's important in my analysis, I didn't stop there. I took my readings consistently across the active construction zone. That they were also showing me what a potential building 2 and 3 could look like. In that district, or in that area, the decibel readings were getting into, I believe, the 80s, where, I mean, it's an active construction zone, so you can imagine it to be, you know, a lot. I also took them at my house at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, and I was at like 58 decibels in my backyard. And I live in a pretty standard suburban setting where you heard bird chirping and kids playing. I also went to the existing site on a Saturday during non-operational time today and took additional readings, and I was up into the 70s. I went to the school and took additional readings, and I was at 65. So noise is certainly an issue, and it's an issue that I've heard many times from the constituents. And I think it's something that I've seen many times over in committees, that this petition has to remain at 65 decibels at the property line. Now, I personally think it's gonna be a challenge for them, not because of their operations, because of the operations that exist within that area today. And then one other thing that I would point out is, as you go north of this district too, you get to Washington Street. And so as we look at things like the school and impacts to the school, Indigo put out an environmental document when they were going through the blue line planning. And I've copied the source to that document in one of the memos that I sent you. And essentially, they state through Indigo that on the blue line, the active decibel readings will be anywhere between 60 and 70 on Washington Street, which is, you know, just north of the school as well. So that seems to be, that noise range seems to be very consistent with things that we're already seeing in the area. Where I actually think it's gonna be difficult for the petitioner is how other noises don't reflect on their activity, because it was already louder than 65 at that site today. The other things I wanted to start alluding to that I dove into deeply, which were the concerns of the constituents, whether mine or the other counselors here, are the cancer-causing groundwater contaminants. So what was really interesting when I started digging into this information and the memo that I sent over to you, and it addresses the existing land use operations, and I really just try to understand, you know, what is already there, right? And if you're looking around this site, I don't think what we have on the screen is zoomed out far enough, and I'm not asking anybody to change anything. But there is, you know, multiple scrap yards on this, in and around this area already. Trinity Metals, Zor's Recycling, and then there was one other. What I found interesting about these is that they actually have to get IDEM permits for air pollution because of the type of metal particulates that are released into the air based on their scrapyard, you know, metal breaking down process, so to speak. And so there are existing known concerns that are flowing in there from existing businesses today. You have other types of industry that I think the petitioner was alluding to earlier. A lot of it is logistics, warehousing, right? So there are hundreds of dock bays on this road. And it's something that back in 2023, when, even before 23, but 23 when we set up the TIF district over here in my first term, was one of the major concerns I had about this site and made sure that when this site was developed, and I remember talking a lot about this at the time, is that because of the amount of trucks that already use it and that were going to use it, they had to design this site in a way that kept those trucks off the road. And so far, they've done a good job of that, but the point to be made is those things are there today, more of those things are coming, and so those are the diesel exhaust, the diesel fuel, and all of those things that, the concerns are being raised, but they're not new concerns. The other piece that I do want to be very clear about, and that I think the constituents have 100% right to be concerned about, are things like the power demand, the backup generators, the testing, the fuel storage, construction activity, sound, ground flow management, and they all require enforceable commitments. And that is something that has been going on. I can tell you that one of the community members that I worked with on the first petition that I ultimately called down has been very involved in this petition, and she's been very active in getting commitments and getting back and forth. And there's been probably 7 or 8 different iterations of that I've seen DC Blox respond to. I don't think they're done. I still think there's work to be done on commitments. Based on timeline, I still think there's time to get that done. But I do encourage to work on that. One of the big things that concerns me the most about this, and it's really not related to the data center, this is more of a Louth thing, but it is the construction dust that's in that area. IDEM eventually came in, and I think the EPA also came in and identified that there are known contaminants in that ground, in that dirt. But 3/4 of this site is already developed. So we've seen some aerial photos where you only see Monarch, but to the east, there's other buildings that have already been constructed. So about 3/4 of this land is already developed. The DC Blox petitioners haven't moved a speck of dust. So one thing that I do have concern about, I know that that the Louth organization has started to mitigate that, but it's keeping that dust down. But if any construction proceeds pending this, or this petition itself moves forward, that is a number one concern for me, is making sure that there is full mitigation of that construction dust, and that the communities around are protected from that. So the other thing that I do want to allude to that is in this email that I received 50, 60 copies of, is danger to school children. So I took a little bit deeper dive and to try and understand, all right, how long has that school been there? Because I looked and I seen, well, when did the Ford factory come? And I started looking at a chronological order of development in that area. And the petitioners alluded to this, but the Ford factory was built in 1957. And the school actually moved in, the Irvington Community School, not the high school that was there before it. The Irvington Community School moved in 2002. So I think it's just very important for context to know that there had already been industrial type activity happening in that area before the school moved into that area. And so essentially, the school moved in 2002, and the factory closed its last hydraulic steering component in 2011. So the school operated there while the Ford folks for quite some time. The other piece that I think is just critical to me is when I look north of the school, is where, it starts to get into the more commercial district, Washington Street, right? You've got some of the Irvington plazas and things over there, and a lot of storage facilities just north of it, just like your residential type of storage facilities. But you also have a facility that really stands out to me, and that is a nearby motel. And why that stands out to me is, it is the Skyline Motel. And that Skyline Motel has been under a ton of scrutiny for many years. There's actually been ordinance created because of the amount of crime and negligence that's come out of that as well, and other hotels like it. The school is within the same proximity of that motel as the proposed data center. And what gives me a lot of resolve is that there's no attack on the motel or people that use it, but the existing use of it shows that there are, to me, more concerns with the transient use of that building than the line structure that the secured access of what a potential data center could show. And as I was mentioning, the other thing that stood out is the noise. I mentioned to you already that Indigo put out their decibel reading, so the noise that's coming from the north of that school is equivalent to whatever would come from the south of that school and what exists today. So I say all that, not that the conditions aren't important, they are very important, and I think a lot of conditions can be met. But when we're looking at this particular petition, what I have to ask myself, when we're looking at the facts of what I have in front of me from my personal investigations, is this development more intensive or causing more harm and burden than the existing examples that I've already provided, that I've already researched in the area? And that's what I'm having a hard time saying yes to. I think there's a lot of activity because it is an industrial area, but the school moved in after that, and that's just the reality of what happened there. But I think that does not omit the need for conditions and commitments in this area for sound, for generator testing, generator emissions, construction dust on the brownfield work, traffic and site access, and as well as public transparency. All of those commitments have to be solid as stone if this petition is to move forward. And the last piece, because it's the last bucket that I operated in, is the financial piece. And I think that's the piece that's most, the last piece, very interesting to me. Why it's interesting to me is because when I took the opportunity to run for council again in this district, it was a new district, and I moved farther to the east. And I inherited this part of the party side where I've got Washington Square Mall, the entire east side corridor. And at the time when I did my tour, the biggest concern that I had from people was economic development on East Washington Street. And it was the Washington Square Mall equally. And just a few months back, the other thing that became the second most important thing, it actually happened to reside in District 14, but in a very similar situation, it's right across the street from District 20, it's the YMCA. Those are the two biggest concerns that I have in District 20 is how do you bring back the YMCA and how do you make it new Washington Square Mall? What's interesting about this petition to me is even under the abated projections I've seen is the amount of tax revenue both to the existing TIF that's in the area as well as the community impact. I'll start with the TIF. The first projection I've seen on the TIF is $11 million in that TIF. What's important is I helped create that TIF back in 2023 with current council predecessor, Councilor Larson. What we did is we took any potential new property tax revenues that come from the Thunderbird site and we applied them to Irvington Plaza and we applied them to Ellenberger Park and we applied them to another place within the Irvington district. That's $11 million of property taxes over a 10-year period that would stay in those areas. Now, one of the hard lines in the sand for me, if I'm really going to support on this, is that I also need to see a commitment that there will be a redrawing of the allocation area to include the Washington Square Mall, because I too hosted a community public session and had people there, and they weren't satisfied with all those dollars going to just that part of the district. They wanted to see it go farther east, and that's Washington Square Mall. The second piece of the financial component that's very important to me is the amount, even under abated, that goes to the school districts. So right now, we're all dealing with Senate Bill SEA 1, where there's a lot of reductions in property taxes that hit a lot of our schools really hard. There's no other type of development that I've ever seen that will produce $1 million of taxes a year for the Warren Township School over the next 10 years and more after an abatement is over. That is a massive impact because those are operating revenues that they can use on teacher raises and things of that nature. The last piece, which is I think one of the most important for the community that I've heard, is what do you do with the community impact payment? Because essentially, when an abatement goes in, a percentage of that abatement has to be written in a check, and it has to go to the community impact. And the most relevant at-hand opportunity today is to save the YMCA. And we have been in conversations with Shepherd Community Center, who is actively building a group of partners and actively communicating with the YMCA. And we, through myself and through this group, are trying to help support the creation of that process to create another third space on the east side, revitalize that building under the Shepherd Community Center with other partners, and bring back that space that was just taken away from the east side. And I mentioned there are two things that are extremely important to people I represent. It is the Brandsburg YMCA and it is the Washington Square Mall. And financially, this helps that and it supports the schools. And those are the things that I'm wrestling with, that I'm conflicted on. The answer that I don't have is in concrete that those dollars and those figures are accurate. I don't have what's accurate and concrete is that in a approved, agreed upon plan for the line. We're still working through that. We are still waiting on the IEDI to give us those projections. So right now, I can't give you a position one way or the other. I can tell you I just told you everything that I've looked at, everything that I've heard, all the considerations that I'm taking. But I'm not gonna tell you I'm supportive or I'm not supportive, because I still need to know what's gonna happen on the financial arm of this project. If the financial arm can come through, I think there's a real opportunity for the east side. But until we know that, I can't give you an affirmative one way or the other. And that hurts my time.
Thank you for your comments.
What is wrong?
No, we already have remonstrance. What? Are you a counselor?
I'm, against it.
Okay, so the remonstrance time is up.
Hmm.
Remonstrators had 15 minutes, they already gave their comments, and then the counselors were allowed to speak. So now I'm gonna ask for the staff for their remarks. Kathleen?
Queen has spoken.
Thank you, Judy. As you know, this request involves two requests, one for planning and one for variances. I want to talk about the planning. Staff has reviewed the replat of, Block A, and finds that it does meet the subdivision regulations. I would note, though, that staff made an error on the date of that plat. The plat itself is correct within the staff report, but the date for the plat is May 28th, 2026, not March 23rd. And that's on page 221 of the staff report. So if you find that you will approve the plat, it should be subject to that file dated plat, May 28th. Moving on to the property itself, it is the other error that staff made on overlays. Yes, it is in the industrial reserve overlay. It lies within the transit-oriented overlay. However, the ordinance excludes industrial uses from that overlay. So any comment or reference to the overlay to transit-oriented development related to this should not be considered. But again, this is within the industrial reserve. Moving on to the variance of use. They are requesting a variance of use to permit a data center campus. And as you know, and the staff has been struggling with this is an unlisted land use. This use would be, however, within the I-3 zoning district. There are there are 5 criteria that is used to evaluate a variance of use. The first one relates to public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. There's already been a reference made to the public testimony and correspondence have raised concerns related to potential impacts of the proposed data center use that includes noise, generators, overall energy consumption. Staff acknowledges this as concerns and as part of the public record, but took that into consideration during the zoning analysis. Indy rezone anticipates industrial uses with operational impacts and addresses such impacts through applicable development standards, performance regulations, and the ability to enforce commitments. In this case, staff believes the petitioner has proposed commitments that directly regulate operational characteristics of this data center campus, which would place limitations on generator testing hours, sound level monitoring, required buffering, screening, and the use of the closed-loop cooling system. Emergency generators would also be enclosed in insulated structures, and they would be subject to IDAM air permitting requirements. The petitioner has also committed to funding necessary electrical infrastructure improvements and any associated costs that are not borne, and so that assure that any associated costs are not borne by the local taxpayers. And that may include an on-site substation. The staff finds that the requested variance of use as conditioned does not create an unregulated or unchecked impact on public health, safety, morals, or general welfare beyond what is contemplated for the industrial development in this I-3 zoning district. Adjacent, the second criteria related to a variance of use relates to adjacent property impacts. Staff believes that because of this site size, configuration, and separation from the nearby protected district would include Pensy Trail. That, combined with enhanced transitional yards, existing easements, and operational commitments, reduce the potential off-site impacts. And then with the strict adherence to the commitments to install enhanced screening to the neighboring properties. Staff also believes that the vehicular circulation, ingress, egress associated with this would not introduce large deviations from the current traffic impacts along English Avenue. The variance of use does not introduce adjacent property impacts beyond those contemplated and regulated under what is now an I-3 zoning district. Uniqueness of the property is another criteria that is reviewed. With the significant depth, existing utility easements, and proximity to high-capacity electrical transmission infrastructure, staff believes that those features provide considerable transitional yards and buffering that would not be feasible on a smaller industrial parcel, but it does provide for that on this one. While the ordinance does not expressly list data centers as a permitted use, the operational characteristics of a proposed campus align closely with light industrial development patterns. The staff finds that the combination of the site size, depth, infrastructure access, and prior industrial entitlement constitutes the conditions peculiar to the property that supports the requested variance. As you know, the strict application of the ordinance would prohibit the proposed use solely due to the absence of a listed land use. Despite the staff's physical suitability and infrastructure capacity, staff finds that this constitutes an unnecessary hardship not created by the petitioner. In terms of the comprehensive plan, the current request for the variance of use seeks to approve a data center campus, which is again an unlisted use under a new rezone. They're not expressly listed as a permitted use. The proposed use is industrial in nature and aligns with the general employment and industrial character contemplated by the I-3 zoning district. This variance would not introduce a new land use category, nor does it represent further departure from the comprehensive plan. Staff finds that the variance of use does not materially conflict with the comprehensive plan recommendation of heavy industrial and the industrial reserve overlay. When considered in the context of the existing I-3 zoning, and that the proposal constitutes to advance an industrial use consistent with the established zoning framework for the site. There have been commitments that have been submitted by the petitioner, and that staff is requesting commitments that the staff believes that will tie the use down and enforce some clear, measurable, enforceable, and directly related mitigating potential impacts associated with The consolidated zoning and subdivision ordinance will address potential concerns related to noise, visual screening, lighting, traffic, operations, water usage, and utility infrastructure, which will be applicable in this case. And again, staff believes that the commandments do not conflict with the intent of the new rezone and operate to enhance performance standards tailored to this specific characteristic. The second variance relates to the development standards, which is simply a parking reduction. Based upon the size of what is proposed, 420 off-street parking spaces would be required. However, given the fact that the use category is not included, and data centers are not an expressly permitted defined use, that the data centers are typically limited to maintenance, security, and technical staff, resulting in parking demands substantially below parking ratios used for commercial or industrial classifications. And for that reason, staff is recommending support and approval of that no less than 100 on-site off-street parking spaces, which then reduces, and the petitioner's representative indicated, the unused parking areas, unnecessary impervious surface expansion, and minimizes runoffs and preserves area available for buffering. And again, staff is recommending approval of the plat, the variance of use, and the variance of development standards. As you might know, there has been, from what you have received, there have been a number of emails received. As of approximately 9 o'clock this morning, there were 132 emails that have been received, 7 of which that is support. Since that time, and that's until staff came here to the meeting, there have been 14 additional emails that have been sent. So what this is saying is that there are emails continuing to come in on behalf of these petitions. And with that, staff will be glad to answer any questions.
14.
Sorry.
It's a crock of shit.
Okay, you can leave. I've made this very clear from the beginning.
Then correct.
Just to be clear, the 14 was from 9 o'clock until 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Petitioners, you have 5 minutes for a vote, please.
Thank you. There's an old saying that the past predicts the future. I think that's applicable here. DC Blox has built these buildings. They've been great partners to the community in places they operate. They've been beyond generous and charitable in those locations. We don't have an entire list of all the economic benefits to date for this project because we don't have all the applicable tax information back from city partners at this time. However, DC Blox is committed to conversations with the community and elected officials on what will make a positive impact on each side. We know part of that will be done with inclusivity payments under those tax discussions. We consider the donations to the Parks Alliance and the cleanup of the easement with native plants in the zoning commitments as an obligation to be a good neighbor and not counted in future community benefits. I'd like to now turn it over to the CEO, Jeff Hughes, to make an additional commitment.
Thank you for allowing us to present here today. My name is Jeff Hughes. I'm at 1040 Crown Point Parkway in Atlanta, Georgia. Today I can share a little bit about what DC Blox is planning to do above and beyond and outside any of the tax discussions. DC Blox is working on a multi-million-dollar community benefit agreement, again, outside the inclusivity, with the Shepherd Community that brings an enormous value to the entire east side, as indicated by Councilman Carter. We're hopeful to name the multi-million-dollar project details and partners in the near future and have ongoing discussions in the community as
tab 12, we have environmental reviews, including a letter from today that addresses the air permits, and Chris Ron will speak if we have any minutes here left. There will be a sound study, I know that was mentioned as well. Also on page 6 of our commitment document, there is a commitment for an ongoing website where we'll house those documents that are part of this commitment process so that they're there for the neighbors and the community to see as this project is operational well into the future. We also have, restate, we have 2 property valuation reports done by 2 different certified appraisers that show that there's no impact, substantial adverse impact on property owners. And so now I'll let Chris Braun talk more about the brownfield and environmental concerns.
Thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Chris Braun, Blue Shed Richard Braun, 1346 North Delaware Street here in Indianapolis. DC Blox took seriously a lot of the concerns expressed about environmental issues with the site. So this morning, we supplemented the April 14th letter with another letter that provides more in-depth analysis to allay some of the concerns about the environmental. I'm going to give you just briefly that when Ford Motor Company decided to leave the site, they undertook an environmental investigation and cleanup that resulted in 2023 that they ultimately got a certificate of completion and a covenant not to sue from the state of Indiana, where IDEM concluded that they had brought the site into regulatory compliance and that the levels of contaminants that were left on site were not actionable. They were below trigger levels. When they sold the property in 2022 to DC Law and Thunderbird, they went in and did additional work on the site, and so the environmental restricted covenants that were recorded when Ford did the work on the site were superseded, and Law put in, because of the additional work they'd done at the site, and put in even more restrictive conditions in there. Those are all set forth in there. And all this is a matter of public record. All the reports submitted, they're on the virtual file cabinet, IDEM, they're welcome if anybody wants to look at them. And DC Blox has agreed and committed to all of the 11 restrictions set forth in the amended restrictive environmental restrictive covenant. So with that, happy to answer any questions you might have on the environmental. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And remonstrators, you have 5 minutes for a vote, please.
Megan Lappa. The petitioner has offered significant time to our community to present their case. What I want to address in this rebuttal is not the merits of that effort or of their commitments, but the pattern of how this project has been presented to the people most affected by it, which is one of repeated mischaracterization, all while asking us to trust them. At the April 27th forum, the petitioner's first introduction to our community, their representatives, developer, their sales leadership, they all characterized the site zoning as heavy industrial. Their deck presented to the community and the public-facing assets on their website stated the same, including the press release about D14's forum, only made available through D20 Councilor Hart's newsletter. This site is medium industrial, and that distinction is not semantic. It's the entire basis of this variance petition. The most indicting participant in the heavy industrial characterization of Block A was the petitioner's representative from their local developer, a former member of this very commission, who would have evaluated various cases, just like this one, and who also serves on the plat committee. He knows the difference. At the same forum, DC Blox presented a letter from the president of AES, Indiana, to dismiss resident concerns about energy impact rates. That letter is a PR statement, not a binding commitment enforceable by any resident or public body. Neither AES or DC Blox control our energy rates, and they know this. And nothing in their statement of commitments contains any binding commitments regarding energy costs. The misrepresentation was compounded when DC Blox representative David Armistead acknowledged that energy costs may go up, then immediately assured residents they have a lot of protections in place with AES and their legal commitments, ensuring data centers would not be the cause. That statement is materially false and is inherently misleading to my community. There are no protections in place from AES. There's a PR letter referencing an IRP filing that hadn't even been finalized when it was published. And the one energy-related provision in our statement of commitments requires the developer to coordinate with AES on infrastructure costs. It does not cap ratepayers or prevent future rate increases or establish any causal firewall between their power demand and our higher utility bills. The only body with authority to determine how this project affects our rates is the IURC, which has made no rulings regarding this project and will not do so until after this variance is or is not approved. And the local energy provider is currently in the process of acquisition by a financial backer of this petitioner. The most consequential misrepresentation involved all to the generators, the single greatest source of noise impact on our community, and a concern we've made repeatedly clear. At the D14 meeting, the community was shown 18 generators for Building 3. Their own plan of operations at the same time stated 36, the highest count of any building on campus representing more than half of the site's total. D14 was presented figures reflecting 32% fewer generators, which means 32% less noise, 32% less diesel emissions, right next to a public greenway and our elementary school in a county with a failing airshed. DC Blox called this a filing precaution. They said the numbers shown to our community made it look like they didn't have their numbers together. That's a remarkable characterization for a discrepancy of 18 generators in a building they acknowledge has no contracted customer. They updated their materials without acknowledgement, without outreach to the community members who saw the original figures, and without any public correction whatsoever. When asked directly at D14 meeting whether they would still pursue this project without tax abatements, they said yes. At the subsequent D20, that answer changed with no public follow-up from the falsity that was stated to D14 in April. They promised twice to place a public hearing sign visible from the Pennsy Trail. As of yesterday, that sign has yet to appear. This commission is being asked to grant permanent vested rights to a petitioner who has demonstrated repeatedly that what they tell our community and what they file and follow through on are not always the same thing. And this community has every reason, well documented across multiple forums and meetings, to question whether those commitments are meaningful at all. You are asking our community to accept what has been presented by this petitioner. We ask you weigh not just what they promised on paper, but what their conduct has already shown us. Variances are meant to address use within existing zoning, not to accommodate unlisted uses or bypass the processes that appropriately address what the petitioner is seeking. And Randsburg Y is in my district, Andy Nielsen's D14. It is shocking to hear Councilor Hart's claim as if that were not true, choosing now to announce that he wants to shift the goalposts on our TIF district. So add him to the pile, because we are prepared to show up and fight for that for D14 too. Our community rejects the staff's conclusion, and we maintain our request that this petition be denied. Thank you.
So again, I appreciate everyone coming down this afternoon. I know it's been a really long afternoon. Just as a just I guess to explain what my role is as the hearing examiner. I will hear almost all rezoning petitions in Marion County along with variance and plat petitions. And I am appointed as a land use professional, so it's not a political appointment, it's not an elected position. And so what I am tasked with doing is hearing all the information that is presented to me from all sides and making what I think is the best recommendation based on what I've heard. I will say that over the last year or so, I think we've all learned a lot about data centers. They're everywhere, literally, that you turn. You can read or hear or see something about data centers. And as with any, I guess, newer technology, newer concept, whatever, there's always a learning curve for everybody. One of the reasons that the data centers come here to be heard is because when Indy rezoned, rewrote all of our ordinances 8 years ago, whatever it was, there was no concept of data center, and so it is not listed as a permitted use in any of the districts, and so that's why when when there's a request for one to be developed, it has to either have a variance requested or a rezoning requested, and so it is it's a new concept, and so that's why we have to come to the public hearing to talk about this. There has been a lot of really good input from the remonstrators, the different counselors that spoke, the staff. And I've said this before, staff's role is to provide professional land use advice while being impartial. So they are not, they also listen to what is being said by all sides, but their main role is to provide an impartial recommendation. On this particular petition, this location is in what is considered a heavier industrial zoning classification currently, and there are certainly other heavier industrial uses in the area. As far as the plat is concerned for 26 CPL 815, I am going to recommend approval of that plat and find that the plat filed dated May 28, 2026 complies with the standards of the subdivision regulations, subject to the 11 conditions in the written staff report.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame on you.
No, you don't get to police my response. No data centers. No data centers. No data centers. You don't need to decide what civility is. Civility is not polluting our neighborhood.
Let's go.
Civility is listening to the public.
Yeah.
No data centers.
Come on.
No data centers. 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 Civility is not being in the pocket of developers. No data center. No data center.
Shame.
I need to finish my recommendation. If you all don't want to listen to it, please leave now. But I need to finish my recommendation, okay? Thank you. So for the variances that were requested, I think it is okay. In my opinion, I feel like the required 5 findings of fact have all been met. And I think, staff did a great job of recounting all of those and why they are being met. I think the commitments that have been offered address many of the concerns that have been raised. I understand they're not addressing all of your issues, and I get that. But in my opinion, the plans that have been presented, the commitments that have been presented, the desire to be a part of the community. I think that the requested variance has met all the findings, and I'm recommending approval of the use variance.
DC Blox